honestly, guys notice it more when you're out winning games, right? If Cleveland starts off in a bad start, they're not doing well, and all of a sudden Shedeur or Dillon Gabriel are doing well in 7-on-7, they're throwing dimes, and practice drills, the number one defense can't stop them. People take notice of that, and the more that the players see it, they're gonna then the comments start happening over the lunch table. They start happening throughout the building, and that's when the pressure really will get severe.
The Cleveland Browns were focused on resolving their quarterback situation until Jason Kelce made pointed comments that triggered a strong reaction from ownership. The response inside the organization was immediate and intense. What exactly did Kelce say that has the dog pound on edge and the front office under pressure?
We've seen that miserable game by the Cleveland Browns. So they throw Joe Flacco in there, and I like Joe Flacco. He did good, but they gave him the resource of all the first-team guys. Then they throw Dillon Gabriel in there with first teams and second teams. So Dillon always is getting protected. The same thing again, they gave this scrub max protection on every play. Yeah, he completed some passes, but let's talk about his mistakes. He's still inconsistent with his throws, but he at least had max protection.
The Cleveland Browns continue to be defined by inconsistency and avoidable setbacks. Even as fans hoped the organization had turned a corner, Jason Kelce, fresh off retirement, offered a direct critique that reignited doubts about the team's direction. His remarks implied the franchise's structure and decision-making remain unstable and recent progress may not hold. The takeaway for leadership is straightforward. Identify core issues, align on a coherent plan, and execute with discipline. For supporters, it's another sign that the problems run deeper than a single season.
They throw Shedeur Sanders in there with the lowest cab drivers you couldn't even get on 5th Street. And I'm pissed off, bro, because the play calling was abysmal. Look, even if you don't like Shedeur, Shedeur didn't even get a chance to be trash. Even if you think Shedeur is garbage, he didn't even get a chance to be garbage. That's how awful the offensive line was. Kevin Stefanski still doesn't want to give Shedeur second strings and first strings reps. Why is that?
Browns ownership's response shifted from measured to urgent. The pattern is familiar in Cleveland. The team once treated Johnny Manziel as a franchise solution, retained Hugh Jackson for a second year despite results, and invested heavily in Deshaun Watson through a costly trade and contract. These decisions reflect aggressive but poorly aligned planning. The outcome has been continued instability instead of sustained progress.
That this was the guy that they wanted to start. He's seasoned, he's experienced, he still has a big-time arm, even at his age, and they open with the Cincinnati Bengals. They wanted that experienced guy. He was always going to be the guy. They were not going to start Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders in week 1. Kenny Pickett had a hamstring injury. It makes it easy to go with Joe Flacco. And the question isn't and wasn't going to be who's the starter in Cleveland. The question is, who's going to be the backup in Cleveland? Who's going to be the number 2 quarterback when they open the season against these Bengals?
Fans still show up season after season, expecting improvement and bracing for setbacks. The usual pattern has been early optimism followed by a gradual collapse. But last season was different. For a sustained stretch, the Browns looked organized and competitive, resembling a functioning team.
Couple days, 3 days until roster cutdowns, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you belong here on this team?
Obviously, I think overall as a player, I feel like I put in the work. I feel like everything I do, I try to do it to my best, and that's all I ask for. So I feel like everybody feels like, they should be on the team, and if you ask anybody on the team, would they feel like they belong, in their own eyes. So I feel like I do, but I'm my own player, I think about myself in a high regard.
The front office entered the offseason confident. Kevin Stefanski was being praised, and the Dog Pound believed the team had made real progress. Then Jason Kelce delivered a pointed assessment that cut through the optimism. Fresh into retirement, the former Eagles All-Pro and Super Bowl champion said Cleveland still looks like a team patching over issues rather than building a durable contender. Kelce's view was direct. The Browns' structure is fragile, and the roster is too dependent on perfect health at quarterback. He argued the team is one injury away from losing continuity and sliding backward. Because Kelsey has operated inside a stable, championship-level organization, his comments carried weight with players, media, and fans. The reaction was immediate. People took his critique seriously, not as outside noise, but as an informed evaluation of how a successful team should be built. Ownership also felt the impact. Jimmy Haslam's response shifted to urgency, a sign that leadership recognizes the stakes. The criticism arrives in the context of prior high-risk decisions, especially the fully guaranteed $230 million commitment tied to Deshaun Watson. Watson has missed time and shown inconsistency when available, and the contract has constrained flexibility. Kelsey's remarks highlight why depth, alignment between the front office and coaching staff, and a clear contingency plan at quarterback are non-negotiable. The takeaway is straightforward. Cleveland must convert last season's progress into a stable framework, protect the quarterback, deepen critical positions, and establish a plan that survives injuries and short-term setbacks. Without that, the games that fueled optimism will remain temporary.
If you're a betting man, who do you think starts for the Browns at quarterback?
Okay, this is the situation. Kenny Pickett, they actually traded for him. Joe Flacco, no one's bringing Joe Flacco in the building thinking Joe Flacco's going to be the starter. If Joe Flacco is your starter,
You got a problem.
you have a huge problem. And if they were saying Shedeur was the starter as the 5th rounder, you got a real problem too, because he passed over all these guys in these reps in the offseason in shorts, in bikini shorts, Speedos and stuff. Like, no. That kind of stuff. So I'm not that surprised when you put down a 3rd round pick on a quarterback. You do believe he has a certain skill set.
Jason Kelce stated the obvious. Cleveland committed to a quarterback who hasn't played at an elite level in years, and Joe Flacco's playoff run didn't change the long-term outlook. Ownership appeared more upset that the criticism was public than by the substance of the critique. Many fans agreed. They've seen this pattern before. Rosters age, injuries are inevitable, and when a single contract dominates the cap, one setback at quarterback can undermine the entire season. Kelsey's broader point was about structure. The Browns prioritized the high-cost, uncertain starter over depth and contingency. The late-season surge masked issues that remain: limited cap flexibility, thin depth at key positions, and an offense that lacks a credible plan B. Fans recognize how quickly a strong defense can decline with injuries, and how an offense without redundancy stalls. The AFC North raises the stakes. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson sustains a top standard. Cincinnati with Joe Burrow returns to contention when healthy. Pittsburgh rarely slips below .500 under Mike Tomlin and wins with defense and consistency. In that environment, Cleveland can't rely on perfect health or peak form from one player. The path forward is clear. Diversify cap allocation, reinforce the offensive line and receiver depth, carry a legitimate backup plan at quarterback, and install a scheme that functions regardless of who is under center.
Given what we saw yesterday with Shedeur Sanders, somebody on the Cleveland Browns is 100% getting fired, probably by the end of this year. The person who's probably going to end up getting fired is Kevin Stefanski, because I know that he didn't want Shedeur Sanders on the team. It was Andrew Berry who made that pick. You can't really go against your GM. Bad things happen in this situation. But Shedeur Sanders is not without fault for what we saw yesterday. This is the play that we saw yesterday that has the internet just exploding, where Shedeur Sanders took like a 24-yard sack. Half of the internet is saying that this is all Kevin Stefanski's fault.
Cleveland showed progress last season, but the underlying concerns remain. Jason Kelce highlighted them directly. The Browns' long-term plan is fragile, cap-constrained, and overly dependent on perfect health at quarterback. His comments focused attention on structural issues, roster depth, continuity in coaching, and a sustainable offensive approach, rather than a single hot streak. That criticism resonated because it reflected what many around the league already see. Ownership's reaction underscored the sensitivity. Jimmy Haslam has presided over frequent coaching and quarterback changes, and external scrutiny carries weight when it comes from a respected veteran with championship experience. Kelsey's remarks reinforce that last year's Joe Flacco stretch was a short-term solution, not a foundation. The team still needs a durable plan that can withstand injuries and inconsistency. The practical takeaway is clear: stabilize the system, diversify cap snap usage and build depth at key positions so the offense functions regardless of who is under center. That includes a coherent development pathway for younger talent such as Shedeur Sanders, with defined practice reps, protection, and scheme alignment. Kelsey didn't say anything outrageous. He articulated the gap between a brief surge and a credible long-term contender.
I have the faith of a mustard seed, right? Because this is the greatest resurrection since Jesus the Christ, right? Like at some point, Joe Flacco was thinking about getting into TV, right? Joe Flacco didn't have a job, and then now you not only come back and start for the Cleveland Browns late in the 2023 season, but they came back around to you, and you're now the day one starter for a franchise that just 2 years ago was in the playoffs.
The Browns' quarterback situation remains unsettled. Deshaun Watson was expected to be the long-term answer, but injuries and inconsistent play have prevented him from reaching an elite level. When the team turned to Joe Flacco after Watson's season deteriorated, Flacco immediately lifted the offense and produced results that highlighted the gap between expectations and reality. That a 39-year-old late addition could outperform a $230 million starter was not just a short-term surprise, it raised fundamental questions about roster construction and evaluation. Quarterback depth has been fragile, and the late-season surge masked broader structural problems. Jason Kelsey's remarks made that clear. Cleveland is vulnerable if the starter is unavailable, cap flexibility is limited, and the offensive plan lacks a stable contingency. His critique drew attention to leadership and planning as much as on-field performance. Jimmy Haslam's strong reaction reflects the pressure on ownership. The organization has promoted a message of stability and progress, but Kelsey's assessment suggested those gains are not yet durable. The path forward requires a realistic approach to the cap, a credible backup plan at quarterback, and a system that holds up regardless of personnel. The rumors have ended. The decision is public. Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam has informed every level of the organization that unless an unforeseen injury intervenes, Shedeur Sanders will start at quarterback in week 1. The announcement is not an informal suggestion or a quiet push in the background. It is a direct order. Multiple independent reports, amplified most visibly by Colin Cowherd, confirm that Haslam delivered the directive himself. From the owner's viewpoint, the logic is simple. No one else on the roster offers the same combination of talent, leadership, and long-term upside. Joe Flacco is approaching the twilight of his career. Kenny Pickett has shown flashes but remains inconsistent. Dylan Gabriel, taken in the 3rd round, is a developmental project. By contrast, Haslam believes Sanders can alter the franchise's trajectory immediately, and he refuses to allow internal hesitation to stall that possibility. The standoff traces back to April. General manager Andrew Berry and head coach Kevin Stefanski entered the draft wanting a low-profile prospect who would fit quietly into the existing depth chart. They prioritized scheme familiarity, modest public attention, and a clear developmental timeline. When the board lined up, they reached for Gabriel in round 3, reasoning that an early investment would justify keeping a rookie on ice behind the veterans. But Sanders continued to slide, first through day 2, then deep into round 5. Haslam watched the names come off the board, convinced the league's bias against Deion Sanders' outspoken son was obscuring legitimate first-round talent. When Cleveland's 5th-round pick arrived and Sanders was still available, Haslam intervened. He did more than approve the choice, he overrode the original plan, making it clear that the organization would select Sanders and give him every chance to compete. From that moment on, the Browns' internal narrative splintered into 2 camps, those ready to accelerate around their owner's vision and those still trying to protect their original approach. Once rookie minicamp began, Sanders erased much of the speculation. He commanded huddles, processed coverages quickly, and delivered throws with anticipation that belied his draft slot. Teammates noted his willingness to accept blame for missed timing, then correct the error without dramatics. While Flacco and Pickett split most first-team reps, Sanders treated limited opportunities as full-speed auditions. During organized team activities, he identified blitz looks, redirected protections, and consistently found his second read when the primary route was covered. More than one defensive veteran told local reporters that Sanders looks like the best arm in the building. That assessment forced Berry and Stefanski to reevaluate their timetable. They could no longer label Sanders a long-term project without contradicting on-field evidence. Drafting Gabriel 2 rounds earlier had provided the staff an excuse to slow roll Sanders' ascent. Coaches could point to investment cost, meeting room familiarity, and installation comfort to justify Gabriel's snap share. Yet each practice rep in which Sanders outperformed the 3rd rounder weakened that shield. Behind closed doors, position coaches began requesting more Sanders film for cut-ups, and offensive assistants quietly shifted meeting questions toward concepts the rookie already executed well. By mid-June, Barry himself started describing Sanders not as a developmental asset, but as a competitive option. Those subtle linguistic changes signal the front office's recognition that the narrative had moved beyond their control.
Haslam's history with quarterbacks is well documented. His pushes for Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, and Deshaun Watson were high visibility swings, each driven in part by a desire to generate excitement as well as wins. Critics highlight those choices to question his evaluation track record, yet Haslam perceives Sanders differently. Where Manziel carried off-field concerns, Sanders brings a reputation for professionalism. Where Mayfield's leadership style divided veterans, Sanders' approach has united receivers and linemen. Where Watson's trade involved unprecedented controversy, Sanders arrived at minimal draft cost. Haslam sees a rare chance to capture star potential without mortgaging the future, and he is unwilling to cede that upside to cautious pacing.
Cleveland's supporters, weary of revolving door quarterbacks, have rallied around Sanders with unexpected speed. Sales of customized Sanders number 2 jerseys surged within days of rookie minicamp. Training camp ticket requests spiked once local media circulated videos of Sanders making NFL-caliber anticipation throws during 7-on-7 periods. The mood in Northeast Ohio has changed from tentative hope to active belief. Longtime season ticket holders who once shrugged at preseason storylines now debate Sanders' footwork at neighborhood barbecues. Social media engagement for Brown's content has climbed, driven by highlight compilations of the rookie threading seam passes between linebackers and safeties.
All of this places Kevin Stefanski in a fragile position. If he opens week 1 with a veteran starter and the offense sputters, criticism will be swift. Each stalled drive will be interpreted as evidence that he ignored the owner's edict and the fan base's intuition. Conversely, if he names Sanders the starter solely under pressure, any early struggles could be framed as proof that Sanders was rushed, further exposing Stefanski to blame. The only sustainable solution is conviction. Either stand behind a veteran with clear strategic reasoning or embrace Sanders fully and structure the offense around his strengths. Splitting the difference, rotating series, delaying first-team reps, or using vague competition language will satisfy no one and likely jeopardize locker room clarity.
Sanders' personal approach has reinforced Haslam's confidence. Instead of taking post-draft downtime, he traveled to Texas to train in full Browns gear at facilities near his father's home. The leaked clip of Sanders executing footwork drills in helmet and pads wasn't a marketing ploy. It was a glimpse into a quarterback visualizing Week 1 live. Team personnel who viewed the footage recognized purposeful rehearsal, cadence calls, pocket movement against simulated pressure, and follow-through adjustments based on imagined rush lanes. Observers asked why a rookie would conduct such intense solo sessions in May. The answer is straightforward. Sanders does not view himself as a developmental pick. He considers himself the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns and prepares accordingly.
On pure ability, Sanders' arm strength ranks with the league average for starters. His accuracy to the intermediate middle, an area where the Browns' current scheme generates high leverage completions, has drawn consistent praise from receivers. The primary areas still under review are blitz recognition and live bullets and timing on deep outbreaking routes versus press coverage. Those developmental checkpoints are significant, yet daily practice reps show acceleration. In contrast, Flacco's mobility limits the boot action game that Stefanski installed to help Mayfield early in his tenure. Pickett can extend plays, but struggles to attack tight windows between linebackers and safeties, an essential requirement in Cleveland schematics. Gabriel remains an unknown at NFL speed. Thus, the competitive landscape favors Sanders sooner than the coaching staff originally planned.
The franchise now stands at an inflection point. Haslam's mandate, the locker room's growing support, and the fan base's enthusiasm all tilt towards Sanders. The front office's earlier strategy, anchored in patience and quiet development, is increasingly untenable. Barry's shift in messaging indicates grudging alignment, but final authority over the depth chart rests with the coaching staff, unless ownership directly intervenes on game day decisions. A move rare but not unprecedented in the NFL. Should Stefanski align with the owner and name Sanders the starter before preseason concludes, he can claim proactive vision and tailor the offense through training camp. Should he resist and open with a veteran who falters, he risks rapid loss of credibility and possibly his position. Either path carries pressure, but only one aligns with the momentum sweeping through the building. For 2 decades, the Browns have cycled quarterbacks without securing a stable star. Each new hope, whether draft pick or trade acquisition, has collapsed under injuries, inconsistency, or organizational disarray. The possibility that Sanders could finally anchor the position is not merely a football storyline. It is a potential cultural reset for a fan base defined by resilience. Haslam's insistence reflects that awareness. Cleveland needs a leader who can win on Sundays and project confidence every other day of the week. Sanders has shown he can shoulder expectations without retreating from scrutiny. That trait, more than arm talent alone, is why the owner views him as indispensable. Voluntary workouts transition to mandatory minicamp next week. If Sanders receives a substantial share of first-team snaps, observers will interpret it as the staff's acknowledgement that the competition is tilting decisively. A public declaration may not follow immediately, but every rep allocation is a signal. If, however, the staff continues funneling most top unit snaps to Flacco or Pickett, tension will escalate. Local media will question the evaluation process. National analysts will debate the merits of letting a rookie learn through live action versus controlled practice. Inside the facility, players will recognize any disconnect between performance and opportunity, and unity could fray.
The Browns have reached a decisive moment. Shedeur Sanders has demonstrated the skill, poise, and work ethic to justify starting in Week 1. Jimmy Haslam has publicly positioned him as the future, and by implication, the present of the franchise. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry must either endorse that vision or brace for the consequences of delaying it. For Cleveland fans, the significance is clear. A legitimate chance to exit the cycle of quarterback uncertainty and rally behind a signal caller capable of commanding the field and galvanizing the city. Whether that opportunity is seized promptly or postponed will define the Browns' 2025 season and likely the tenure of the decision makers involved.